Good afternoon, good afternoon. This is Spirit Journey. Today is Thursday, April 30th, 2020, and the time is now 1:40 p.m. Boy, this coronavirus and COVID-19, the one and the same, those two terms, I'm learning more and more about this crisis in New York City. And it doesn't seem to be getting better. What I'm getting out of this whole crisis is that slowly but surely, the rights of people are being infringed on. And in this video, it's how it is going to directly affect the Black people that live in New York City. I did a video yesterday night. I haven't put it up yet, but it discusses about Blacks, whether you're a Black person living in the UK or Black living in the United States of America, that there are health disparities that is happening upon us, and we're dying at a much higher rate in comparison to our white counterparts. So I want to talk about a video that I'm watching right now. And what I will be doing will be taking a screen share, copying what's on the screen and putting it in this voiceover, okay? So it's not looking good. But what I can say is that be aware and talk to people of your community. And so you know what is going on and what steps you can possibly take, okay? So let me begin. So even though things are looking better on paper, there are less deaths, less new cases, it looks like New York City is getting a good control over this virus. However, as you'll see later on in this video, that you're going to see that more aggressive policies will be enacted, and that is what I'm concerned about. So even though everything seems to be getting better, why the severe, more aggressive and more pointed means of control? Now, Governor Cuomo that you see here, he is going to implement different stages on the monitoring of this COVID virus. And he begins with the importance of testing, because when you're able to test, it helps us to monitor and thus control the infectious rate. Okay? Now this testing is going to be a pretense to implement new policies. Okay, so yes, it's good to know about, to be able to find out who has it, and to find out who has it, you do an initial test on people. But it's why and what they're leading to with this testing is what I'm concerned about. So let's say, you got a scratchy throat, you're coughing, maybe a headache or a fever, and you just want to get tested. Hey, I'm not feeling good, or I'm just anxious because I've heard of some people around the neighborhood. They allegedly have COVID virus. So now, you get tested. But what if, when you get tested and you get a false positive? This is where the problem really, really could begin. In this scenario, this crisis, this testing has an 80% error rate. So you get tested. You want to be proactive. You don't want to infect your loved ones or your friends, but you can get in a false reading, a false positive. But either way, you get tested, and let's say you really are, you were exposed to it. Okay. And then on the list, they're going to talk to that person, what they call tracing. Okay, so you get tested, you test positive, then the second part of this plan that's going to be implemented in New York, I think it's the whole state, New York State, not just New York City, they have to contact the people that you were in contact with. And as you see in this diagram, there are going to be 4 different steps with this tracing. Okay, so once you test positive, and then they're going to track down the people you were in contact with, and that's what tracing is all about. And that step in tracing is going to be in these 4 parts, as you see. So you get tested, and then they're going to find out who you were in contact with. So that's what they call a case interview. And then they contact those people. Okay, they're going to be notified, and then they're going to try to implement a quarantine / isolation for 14 days, as it says here. And then the last step here, they're going to follow up on the people that were discovered to have been in contact. Now, Governor Cuomo had mentioned that just yesterday, over 4,500 people were tested positive for COVID. Again, you don't know whether these are false positives, but either way, over 4,500 people were diagnosed as being positive for COVID-19. Now, if you're going to do this 4-step process of the tracing of people, of who these people who got tested positive, to find out all the contacts that they exposed. Okay, so they were saying this is going to be a big project. So guess what is going to happen? Because it's impossible, to try to do this alone, and you have over 4,500 people tested positive. So what's going to happen? Well, we had a Mayor Michael Bloomberg. Okay, he was asked to get involved. Now, he's no longer mayor, so why was he called? Well, you have to follow the money. And so you're going to see how things may be looking very suspicious. How it's slowly giving excuse. Everything you're going to start seeing in this video is how one thing is going to lead to another, and so on, to give an excuse why you're going to implement these programs. Okay? So they want to now justify, because they're going to be hiring and training people. So you have over 4,600 people who tested positive yesterday. And so they're going to say, well, we need 30 people for every 1,000 people in the population. Statewide is going to be from 6,400 to 17,000 tracers. That's what these people are going to be called, tracers. But for me, it just seems like the Gestapo, the spies. that are going to be sent out like spores to go interview all the people that were in contact, like the people who have tested positive, anyone that they've been around. These traces will be sent out to interview all those possible infected people. So a lot of people will be hired in this process. So why I call it like a Gestapo or a military type of strategic? Governor Cuomo is calling these traces as a building an army, okay, building an army of traces, okay, and it's going to be handled in the New York tri-state area. The New York tri-state area is New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. So you can see the logo on the far right in this picture here. So it's going to be a collective, and I have a feeling that if this thing really takes off, that other states possibly will follow. So you're going to get other tri-state areas, in other states in the U.S., and they're going to implement the same thing. And the next thing you know, everybody is building an army, like a central army within the U.S. that's going to be serving as an army of traces, and that's very alarming, okay? And they're going to have someone who's going to help facilitate this, as I mentioned about Bloomberg. He was New York's former mayor. Yes, this Michael Bloomberg, the former mayor of New York City. Now, I should see here, Bloomberg philanthropics, okay? That term supposed to mean that someone who's giving away money, someone who's helping someone else, someone who's doing something out of love and not expecting anything back, right? The term philanthropic is about being altruistic. I just don't feel that. I don't feel that he's doing this for love, and I feel it's just for control. He didn't. He wasn't able to apply for being a mayor again. They put a cap on that, and then he tried to run for president, and that failed. So now we have this coronavirus, and now he wants to get his little fingers back involved with the public through philanthropy. He's going to head, along with Johns Hopkins University and the Department of Health of New York, to train these traces. It's a whole process that he's going to be in control of. So this type of position is almost like bigger than running for presidency, to be able to set up a task force of army of traces, building an army of traces. Well, can't these people maybe be deputized? Yeah, can become deputized probably. So if you don't comply with these traces and answer the questions, because you know what they're going to ask. Oh, you were with so-and-so and that person tested positive, and hey, you have any symptoms, and who did you talk to? And so on and so on and so on. And again, these tests for COVID-19, it has an error rate of 80%. That's 80%. So someone could be falsely targeted or traced by these tracers and get in your business and want to know every contact. I feel it's just becoming very, very invasive. Okay, and that's my fear about this whole thing. And moreover, I think for Bloomberg to be involved in this through his private organization, I think it's a conflict of interest in my book. It's just too close for comfort. You know, there's someone else that's in the media now, and he has a philanthropic organization also. And he goes by the name Bill Gates. And he's going to implement or try to enforce mandatory vaccinations. And these vaccinations going to have this, what do you call it, like a tattoo to it, so when you, I guess, put your the part that got the shot under a certain type of light, you'll be able to see a mark on you to indicate that you were vaccinated, So it's a tracking a tracking system that's going to be permanent on the people who receive the vaccines, So again, he wants to call himself a philanthropic organization, and now you have Bloomberg also go under the term a philanthropic person. I just think this is baloney. So now, okay, you have someone that's going to be trained to be a tracer, but in the meanwhile, you have the healthcare workers, you have the essential workers. They have to report to work every day. But a lot of them are getting sick, and a lot of them are saying, I'm jeopardizing myself by using mass transit, and it's filthy and this and that, and so I'm going to stay home. So, Governor Cuomo wants to initiate that all the, MTA, LIR, and Metro North, they're going to be disinfected because, see, we can't hinder any of the essential workers from getting to work on time and safely, okay? But see, there's another problem with mass transit. It's a thing called the homeless. And so if you have to do this disinfection of the mass transit on a daily basis, you have to deal with these homeless people that like to ride the trains. Some of them sleep on the train. Okay, so what's going to happen to them? Well, during this process, these homeless people are going to go above. And so this is the next implementation of what I think this is really about. And again, always seems like that these diseases in crisis doesn't start out in the Black community, but somehow it affects you the greatest and almost targeted against. So now we have a mayor, de Blasio. He's saying now that since the homeless now can't stay in the subways because the MTA will be doing cleaning between the hours of 1 a.m. to 5 a.m. every day. So now they're above ground. And so he's saying, de Blasio is saying that they have people now, what they call outreach, that are going to be used to handle these homeless people. And I'm thinking, it just seems like a setup. Now, this homelessness has been going on in New York City for ages. So, but Mayor de Blasio didn't specify how they're reaching out and helping them. If you're homeless, you need a home. If you're mental, you need a place where you can get your mind together. So how are they? Now, some people would say, hey, they just put them in a homeless shelter. Well, I've spoken to someone a couple of years ago who was in the homeless shelter in New York City. And people get raped in there. Women are raped. And she was telling me that she was raped. And so she left the homeless shelter and lived on the street because it was safer for her. So I'm really wondering, are these people being directed to these shelters, or are they being policed and cornered somewhere? At least in where I live, I don't see any difference in the homeless population, because the general population is staying at home. So most of the people that you see outside are the people who live on the streets. They don't look, I mean, none of them have masks on. They seem relatively healthy. They seem happy. They converse with one another. They seem to have a social life with other homeless people. They seem unaffected by this. So again, most of the people that you see homeless in New York City, at least in Manhattan, are black people. An overwhelming number of black men. You do also have black women. But I'm wondering, this outreach group that Mayor de Blasio is talking about, I don't know how that's going to work. But what I did see a couple of days ago, there was a young black male. He could have been in his 20s. Now, he was dressed clean, and there was an EMS truck a couple of feet away from him. He was standing, and surrounding him were about 4 or 5 people. EMS, some of them had EMS shirts on. And they didn't look like there was some trained outreach group for this individual. It looked like, I was frightened for the person, because it looked like that they wanted to take him by force. They didn't look compassionate. They were about, hey, how are we going to get this dude in the EMS? And if he's mental, we're going to lock him up. So I'm thinking that this so-called outreach is another excuse of wiping out a population in New York City, primarily black men, to lock them up somewhere. Because this outreach, it did not look like an outreach group. The guy, you didn't see any blood anywhere. He just standing there, but it just looked weird. It was like they wanted to get him. Why they wanted to get him, I don't know. Because I walked in on to the scene. I was walking, and then I see this. So I don't know about these training. I haven't seen anyone in New York City, any special task force to handle the homeless people in New York City. I haven't seen it. Nothing that I've seen has been done regarding them. They seem like they're having a wonderful time, but it's spooky, because you haven't seen any trained people, or unless if they're considering the EMS people and the cops trained people to handle the homeless. This is going to be really something. There's something else that's interesting here that Governor Cuomo mentioned in the video. Now, the outbreak started in China, and then from China to Europe. And I think it was that lawyer coming from Europe and infected residences in New York City. Wouldn't it have been interesting that if now, so this COVID was given to Americans via Europe, but Europe was not banned entry. What if it was Africa? Would people have been banned from Africa to come to the US? But this wasn't the case. But China was banned entry into the US. And when that happened, people called President Trump a bigot and a racist. So it's interesting though, Europe wasn't banned. I don't know what the status now for people from Europe entering the US. But it's just food for thought. If things were reversed, if something started in Africa, what would it have been like? What would the banning be? Would they have been banned? But my mentioning this again is that even though it was a lawyer who came from overseas to the US, and somehow with all that who is greatly affected by this COVID virus are American blacks. And also people, you have blacks that are living in Europe. And again, like in the video that I did yesterday, that in Great Britain or the UK, that even though blacks make up 3% of that population, they're dying at a very high rate in comparison to their white counterpart. So whether black people live in Europe or in the United States, somehow the outcome for our health seems to be compromised. And it's that being that being is what is troubling in this situation, and how to stop it. So I'm concerned again about the what they call the outreach group being used to gather the homeless. And the homeless in New York City is overwhelmingly black people. So an innocent disease starting from China, but in the end, it's going to cause and is causing harm to black people. And I made a video some time ago, last month, regarding that there are going to be specific groups, people who are being trained to go into the projects slash government housing and to interview or to gather information from these people, plus the Native American Indian reservations, and go and bring people there to ask questions, to get information from them. But you don't hear this from being done upon other groups in the United States. Okay? Black people aren't the only so-called minority groups. But why are we being targeted health-wise and in policies, and getting an outreach group to gather the homeless people? So you chase them out of these subways. And the homeless crisis have been alive for a very long time, and you didn't find housing or health care for them. But now you have a crisis. Again, never waste a crisis. And using this crisis to now gather people, and now using a system we call tracing. So it's like it's getting very like spying on people. I don't see freedom ahead for any of us. I think this COVID virus or corona virus is potentially really dangerous on its social level, not even just the health, but it's going to stigmatize people. So now you have these tracers who are going to try to find every person that you had in some type of contact with, and so on and so on. Your name could go on a database of all people that you were in contact with and yourself. How is this going to affect, let's say you want to apply for health insurance? Could this affect your ability to get health insurance? Or let's say, after all this crisis is over with, you apply for a job, and they'll just say, oh, we'll take a look at the database to see if your name's on it, and oh, I'm sorry, you can't get a job in the health field, or you can't get a job as a school teacher because you're going to affect all these people in the hospital or day schools. You know? So this is really potentially very, very dangerous. And again, it could be a false positive. They could say, okay, you can't go into public housing because you can affect potentially other people if this virus manifests again. So my concern is that if your name goes on a list, who will have access to that list, and how is this list going to affect your life in the long run? What's going to happen? So this is just food for thought. And again, a flu-like virus becoming something so deadly, and Gestapo-like happenings going on, different policies that could really affect you, just like what happened in World War II. People were being rounded up. People's names were getting put on a list. And so many things could happen in between. And now also things could be happening against our homeless population. Is this crisis really about doing these things as an excuse that this is like maybe the beginning of a phase to remove these so-called undesirables and to set up a new system? So those are my last notes. Let me know what you think, what your experiences are in the cities that you live in. Have you seen people being surrounded by outreach groups upon the homeless? What do you see? So thank you again for listening, and enjoy the rest of your day in safety. Bye-bye.